Hey everyone! Today on the Gilbert.K show, we're joined by award-nominated filmmaker David Midell, the creative force behind the killing of Kenneth Chamberlain and the gripping true story thriller The Ritual, starring Al Pacino. We'll dive into how this powerful film came to life, the stories behind the scenes, and the passion that drives his work. Let's welcome David Midell.
Hey David, pleasure to have you on the show. Before we dive in, what clip we're gonna watch or listen to? Can you
Sure.
set
Well,
up for us?
yeah. Thank you for having me in the first place. And what we're going to be watching is the trailer for my film, The Ritual.
Excellent. Let's watch it or listen to it.
Brethren, put on the armor of God, that you might withstand the devil.
This is a very troubled woman, hissing at the side of a church.
The woman's parish wishes to attempt a solemn sacrament.
You mean an exorcism? Would like me to perform it?
No, some poor other soul already has that distinction.
We are the Lord's army in this battle.
I feel we should forego the restraints.
She is touched by something otherworldly.
What if what she really needs is a doctor?
We are paying a price for your lack of faith.
By your holy resurrection,
deliver us, O Lord.
Something is happening, and it's affecting all of us.
What you are doing is failing. The sisters are traumatizing. I want to shut this down.
I feel like I'm being drawn into something. I can't sleep, I can't think.
For us to be divided is for us to fall. We are the ones that stand in the breach and hold back the darkness.
It is he who commands you. Look at the light, Emma! See the cross of the Lord. Reveal yourself.
Emma?
Emma?
Okay, that's great. We're gonna start our first segment, Origins and Inspiration. You began your journey as a therapist working with people with disabilities. How did that path evolve into directing films like Night Lights and The Killing of Kenneth Chamberlain?
As many people in this business, the path is sort of winding and circuitous. It's not a direct linear path. I'd always been involved in the arts. I was a musician for a very long time, and I actually my college degree was in theater. And I obviously in theater school I took as many film classes as I could, learned as much as I could about filmmaking, and I ended up going back to school to get a teaching degree in special education. And I ended up working with students with disabilities for many, many years in Chicago, while I was sort of first kind of dipping my toe into the film world, figuring out, how to make a film, if that was something that I could even do. And, all the films that I made were really informed by the work that I was doing with the disability community, aside from the fact that I am on the autism spectrum myself. And so, the disability community is something that's obviously very, very close to my heart, very personal for me. And it was so, working in the community was so sort of inspiring and heart-wrenching and really gave me, a sense of some of the challenges that people with disabilities and their families have to face on a regular basis. And it really kind of sparked an interest in me in asking questions about how really vulnerable people are treated in American society, in society worldwide. You know, what services are available, are vulnerable people or people with disabilities or mental health challenges or low income people or people of color, you know, are vulnerable people really given the respect and the dignity that they deserve? And are they really being served the way they should be? So, you know, the films that I've made have really kind of asked a lot of those types of questions in different ways. And that was kind of my way into it, you know, from working with the disability community. And I also worked in some very low income areas of Chicago, areas that were very segregated along, you know, socioeconomic and racial lines, that kind of thing.
Wow. Wow, that's amazing. As a filmmaker on the autism spectrum, has your neurodivergence perspective influenced your storytelling choices behind the camera?
Yeah, very, very much. I think, you know, jumping off of kind of what I was saying before, it's really, you know, being on the spectrum myself and having worked with the disability community for so long, it's really reinforced a lot of those questions that I want my films to ask. You know, are people with disabilities or are just vulnerable people in general given the respect and dignity that they deserve? Are they provided with the support that they need to really live a life with, you know, of dignity and respect? And are they given the support that they need to you know, raise a family, have a love life, have a rewarding professional life, all those kinds of things. So they being on the spectrum myself and the work that I've done has definitely been a huge part of shaping you know, the stories that I want to tell, how I want to tell them, et cetera, et cetera.
That's amazing. What was the very first image or experience that made you say, I want to make movies?
Yeah, there were so many. And I think, you know, just being a kid, I mean, there were many experiences that I had as a kid that were really sort of revelatory in terms of like cinematic experiences. Sitting in the theater, I remember sitting in the theater watching a movie like Jurassic Park and being completely awed by it. You know, watching a film, you know, I'll never forget the first time that I saw a film like The Exorcist. You know, it really imprinted on my central nervous system. You know, a film like United 93, you know, I was just about to graduate college when I saw that film. But even at that age, even you know, when I was 21 or 22, seeing that film was completely revelatory. And I remember sitting in the theater after the film ended, just not being able to move a muscle. You know, having to just sort of, I guess the right word would be calm down after, you know, that film is so incredibly intense on a visceral level and relates to society in so many ways that I just remember being completely floored by it. And it was those kinds of experiences that really reinforced in my mind what a powerful impact film can have.
Yeah, that's amazing. So when you were a kid, were you into photography? Did you have a camera? Or were you like in a play or
Not really surprising. You know, I sort of came to film from the music world. I was a percussionist. I started college as a percussion performance major, and I performed with drum and bugle corps and rock bands. I was a gigging musician around Chicago for many years, just playing in various rock bands, and so I kind of came to the film world through music. You know, because there, you know, any film, there's a rhythm to it, there's a heartbeat to it, and it you know, film ebbs and flows the same way a piece of music ebbs and flows, and I think, you know, so I kind of came to it from that perspective. You know, film music can have a visceral impact on the audience the same way that a film can have a visceral impact. So I kind of came to it rather than, you know, being an actor as a kid or being really, really interested in, you know, musical theater, or like I never, through elementary and middle school, I never really acted in a play. I was in the orchestra for musicals, and I was in the orchestra for operas, and playing in jazz bands, rock bands, drum corps, those kinds of things.
Yeah, yeah. That's great. Okay, we're going to take a break and we're going to play a game, This or That. It's a rapid fire game. In this game, you'll need to choose one or two options as quickly as possible. Are you ready, David?
Yes, let's do it.
Okay. Studio film or indie film?
Indie film.
Long rehearsal or improv magic?
Improv magic.
Night shoot or early morning call?
Night shoot.
Directing actors or editing in post?
As much as I love actors, and I really, really do, production is so stressful that I feel much more relaxed and myself in the editing room.
Editing. Okay. Drama or thriller?
Drama.
Truth or mystery?
Truth.
Festival premiere or streaming drop?
Festival premiere.
Storyboard everything or discover on the day?
Discover on the day.
Awards, season buzz or quiet audience impact?
Quiet audience impact. Yeah.
Okay, great. Let's move on to the next segment, process, projects, and impact. Your debut feature, Nightlights, tackled autism with grace and humanity. What were the biggest emotional or technical challenges during its production?
The biggest emotional challenge, I think, was making sure that we were doing justice to the millions and millions of people who, either have a family member who's on the autism spectrum or who are on the autism spectrum themselves. We felt a huge responsibility to make sure that we were portraying the challenges and the triumphs of that community with as much dignity and respect as possible. I think that was the biggest kind of emotional challenge, and logistical. Any film, there's just the logistics are just a nightmare for any film, because there's so many different people who are involved, so many different logistics that have to come together on the day in the right way, and that's always a challenge for sure.
Yeah. That's amazing. In The Killing of Kenneth Chamberlain, it's for me, it is a masterpiece. You balance realism with cinematic urgency. How do you approach directing scenes that are both intimate and intense?
I think just with as much honesty as possible, and I think giving the actors the space they need to go through whatever process they need to go through. On that film, in The Killing of Kenneth Chamberlain, we were basically almost making two films. We were making the film inside the apartment with Frankie Faison alone, and then we were making a totally separate film outside in the hallway with the police officers. So Frankie was so incredibly dedicated to getting in the headspace of that character, and it was difficult. That was a very dark headspace to be in for several days, and he was just so incredibly dedicated to it that I just wanted to make sure that I was giving him the space that he needed to get into that really emotionally vulnerable state. So it's definitely, I think, making sure that everyone feels supported and giving them the space they need to go on that journey from a cast perspective is really the most important thing. And then I think from the crew's perspective, just trying to keep the atmosphere as, I don't know if I would say light, because it is a very serious subject matter, but trying to not letting the crew kind of fall into a really kind of depressive, morose state. You know, there is even on a very serious film like that, there is room for lightness between takes. There's room for jokes between takes, and I think that was something that I tried to focus on a lot, because you know you don't want it to be you don't want it to be I mean, filming something is already a difficult enough experience. You want to try to keep the atmosphere as positive and supportive as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. So, are you type of directors who rehearses a lot, or you just do a table read and you just jump into the film?
Yeah, that's it. You know, I've kind of done it both ways. It really largely depends on the preferences of the cast. We've had, you know, I've worked on films that for example, with something like Night Lights, the actors did not want to rehearse. They wanted to preserve the spontaneity and the authenticity of those interactions, so they did not want to rehearse them ahead of time, because they felt like, well, if we're rehearsing it a whole bunch of times, then it's going to lose its spontaneity, it's going to lose its sense of authenticity, which I totally understood. So we just allowed it to play out on the day, and it was really sort of similar with Kenneth Chamberlain. We didn't have rehearsal time, and I think the actors were all on board with just discovering it on the day, letting it flow on the day. Whereas this recent film, The Ritual, we did have rehearsal time, and it was beneficial because we were able to block out some of the action-y type sequences and figure out, okay, this actor's going to be here, and then on this line they're going to move over here, and it was a chance for the actors to get to know each other a little bit. And when we have, we had actors like Dan Stevens and Al Pacino, who were very, really classically trained theater actors, and so they were very comfortable with the idea of rehearsal. Somebody like Frankie Faison, who was the lead in The Killing of Kenneth Chamberlain, is also a classically trained theater actor, but he was game to just jump in and explore on the day. So it really depends on the preferences of the cast and the crew, and the material, if the material lends itself to spontaneity and authenticity.
That's great. That's great. So you worked with, you work with legendary talents like Frankie Faison and Morgan Freeman as an executive producer. What were some moments on set that felt surreal or career defining?
There were, on The Killing of Kenneth Chamberlain, I mean, there was just, I could see it, and I've known with all of my films that the performances that we're getting are really, really special. I've seen it, and I've known it with all the films that I've made, but watching Frankie alone in the apartment, he had no other actors to play off of for 98% of that film. He was just acting with himself, and just watching how deep he was going into that role. Especially, I remember we shot one of the most intense scenes in the film. We shot on the second day of shooting, and I knew on that second day, I was just in awe of the performance that he was giving us, because we shot some of the really intense scenes very early in the shoot, unlike Night Lights and The Ritual, and so that was those were really sort of career defining. Just that was, the hair on the back of my neck was standing up when we were shooting some of those scenes. And then, of course, when somebody like Morgan Freeman signs on to a film, it feels like, okay, this is going to be something really, really meaningful. And the fact that the film resonated with somebody, like Morgan, who has the stature of Morgan Freeman in this business, was really, really meaningful for my producing partner and I.
Wow, that's amazing. Very inspiring. So your work often centers marginalized voices. How do you ensure authenticity and responsibility telling these stories?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely kind of one of the biggest weights that I normally feel on my shoulders is making sure that we're doing justice to these people's stories and not trivializing or sensationalizing their experiences. I think just the way that I've tried to do it is just by immersing myself in the information, in the facts, talking to as many people who are involved in the community as possible. With the killing of Kenneth Chamberlain, we were very, very close with the Chamberlain family, particularly Kenneth Chamberlain Jr. It was very, very important to us that he feel comfortable with the film. He came out to set and visited the set and spent time with the cast and the crew, which was also really important to us. So that's one way. That was kind of the case with Kenneth Chamberlain, and then with something like The Ritual, it takes place in a Catholic community. It takes place mostly in a convent. The majority of the characters are members of the clergy, whether it's nuns or sisters or priests. We wanted to, speak with as many people in the Catholic community as possible. We spoke with several clergy members, nuns, sisters, priests. We did have the chance to speak with a couple of exorcists. So that was really important, and it's been really gratifying with all of my films to see that the disability community was very, very supportive of Nightlights, and the Chamberlain family and the community where the events in the killing of Kenneth Chamberlain took place was really, really supportive of our film, The Killing of Kenneth Chamberlain. And it's been really nice to see that the Catholic community has been really, really supportive and enthusiastic, and has I think we've gotten so many messages over the past couple of weeks from priests and members of the Catholic community thanking us for treating their community, treating the events of the film, and treating the real people who went through these experiences with respect and doing justice to their story.
Wow, that's amazing. So the buzz around your latest film, The Ritual, is strong. What drew you to such a controversial and spiritual true story, and how did you land Al Pacino?
Yeah, it was an interesting process. I grew up Jewish. I was bar mitzvahed. I grew up in a Jewish household. So I was kind of coming at this story from a little bit of an outsider's perspective. And there were so many things about it that fascinated me. I've always been a very scientifically minded person. I look at facts, I look at data. And at the same time, there was something mysterious about this story that fascinated me so much. I was doing the research and thinking to myself, how could some of what ended up happening in this real story, how could this have all had a purely scientific explanation? There had to be. It almost felt in my mind like, how could there not have been some type of spiritual or otherworldly or mysterious forces at play? Even though I've always been a very scientifically minded person. I have lots of members of my family that work in the medical field. But it was the mystery about the story that really fascinated me. The fact that some of it felt unexplainable to me. And of course, the fact that this story was one of the primary accounts that the author, William Peter Blatty, used in the development of his original book, The Exorcist. That was really fascinating to me as well. The fact that this was one of the primary sources that he took from, or took information from. And how Al Pacino came involved, he was actually the first cast member who was attached. The producers, began a conversation with his agents, and I one day they called me up and they said, Al wants to meet with you to talk about the script. And that was really, really exciting. And it was exciting, but it was also terrifying. Because I mean, the idea of having Al Pacino in a film like this was just, it was mind-boggling. So I went to the meeting, and I was very nervous, unsure of how it was going to go. I had never met Al before, but within 10 or 15 minutes, it just became a conversation between me and him. You know, talking about the characters, the story, the arcs, the real events, and it. You know, Al himself is so approachable and disarming and gracious, and he's just a really good person, and he is so easy to be around that you forget who you're talking to. You know, you forget that you're talking to one of the most famous, revered, respected actors in the history of film. And it's really been a tremendously rewarding collaboration. You know, I think Al was very passionate about the story, very passionate about the characters, was, you know, really contributing all throughout the entire process. Even during post-production, he would send us, you know, thoughts and ideas about how to tweak certain moments in the film. So it's really a rewarding collaboration that I've been lucky enough to have with Al for the past couple of years working on the film.
That's amazing. Just curious, how long did it take you to film it?
We shot the film with the full cast and crew in I think it was 22 days, 22, 23 days. And then we had a couple days after that with a smaller crew without the actors, where we were just doing, you know, B-roll and inserts and those kinds of things.
Yeah. That's great. That's great. From Chicago to the national stage, how has your indie journey taught you about the business side of filmmaking?
The business. I mean, it is a really, really tough business. I mean, you know, that's a cliche. Everybody says it, but
Yeah.
it really is. It's the just making a film is such a tremendous accomplishment. Just getting a film finished from you know, the beginnings of writing the script to getting everything in the can before you've edited, before you've done any sound mixing, to eventually having a finished product. I mean, it really is a tremendous accomplishment. And I think having made the films that I've made, it's given me such a greater appreciation for just how difficult it is to get a film made. I mean, how difficult it is to find the money to get the film made, even. You know, it is really, really challenging, and it's given me a much greater respect and admiration for, you know, people who stick it out. You know, not that people who leave the business are not, you know, I mean, there's so many reasons why somebody might make the decision to leave the business. It's absolutely so many legitimate reasons why people do that are completely understandable. But it really, I think it takes a special kind of almost insanity or almost like a I don't know what the right word is, but you almost have to be. You have to be willing to accept so much, so many hurdles and roadblocks and so much rejection and so many hardships in order to actually see a film through. That it really is an incredible accomplishment to just get a film done. So I think the time that I've spent in the business has just given me a much greater appreciation for that.
Wow. So we're going to take a break and we're going to play a game, True or False. And
Okay.
it's time to test some quirky facts about your life and career.
Okay.
Are you ready, David?
Yes, let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay. True or false? You wrote the first draft of Night Lights in under a month.
False. I actually I was involved in the story, but we had a great screenwriter, Nick Izzo and Adam Dick, who actually wrote the screenplay. It probably took us about a month to develop the story together, but then they went off for several months and wrote the script.
After, yeah, okay. True or false? You once considered quitting filmmaking entirely after your first short.
It's still happening today all the time. Every day I wake up and wonder why I do this. So that's true, I guess. Yes.
You've never cried on set during a scene. True or false?
I want to say it's false. I think
Yeah.
sometimes the performances have just been so moving that I've been lucky enough to capture in my films that I think I have at least teared up.
Yeah. True or false? You cast an actor for Kenneth Chamberlain just 24 hours before shooting.
False. I think we were close to that, maybe 36, 72 hours, but I think 24 was, I think we had everybody cast 24 hours before.
Wow. True or false? Al Pacino improvised several lines in The Ritual.
True. He did. And he was very involved in, tweaking dialogue here and there. But there were many of the lines in the finished film were his contributions. Even the ones that were just improvised on the day.
Wow. True or false? You edited some of your own films yourself.
True-ish, but not really. We the last couple films that I've worked on, my producing partner has edited, and he is such an incredibly brilliant editor that he usually puts together the assemblies, the rough drafts, and then he and I sit together and tweak from there. But the credit has to go to him.
Okay. True or false? You prefer handheld over Steadicam for intimate scenes?
It's so funny that the handheld is very controversial. I prefer it. It depends on the material. It depends on the material and what's happening in the scene. But there is something about those handheld cameras that really cuts very deep with me, because it really helps. It in my mind, it helps break the distance down between the audience and the characters. If you look at a film like, I think about the films of Paul Greengrass, whether it's one of the Jason Bourne movies or his docudramas like Bloody Sunday or United 93. Those films would not be the same if it was all on Steadicams.
That's true. Yeah. Okay. And true or false? The Ritual was originally pitched as a documentary.
False.
False. Okay. Our final segment: legacy, reflection, and advice. Looking back, how do you think your identity as a filmmaker has impacted the conversations your films have sparked in Hollywood?
It's very interesting, because I have felt a special connection to a lot of the films that I've made for different reasons. I think Nightlights, obviously being on the autism spectrum myself and having worked in the disability community for so many years, it really made that film personal for me. And that was always part of the conversations that we had about the film. With The Killing of Kenneth Chamberlain, I'm obviously, Kenneth Chamberlain Sr. was an elderly African-American veteran with bipolar disorder. And, I'm not African-American. I'm not a veteran. I'm not elderly, and I don't have bipolar disorder, but there was something about his experience that resonated very deeply with me. I think because working in the field that I've worked in, we had to go through very, very extensive crisis management training. We had to learn how to communicate with somebody who is in the midst of a mental health crisis in a way that was respectful to them, in a way that kept them safe, in a way that kept us safe and kept everyone else around the situation safe. And what really made that film personal to me is the fact that I have seen crisis situations resolved safely and respectfully. And I've seen crisis situations spin completely out of control and people get hurt, violence occurs. I've seen both of those. I've seen them go both directions. So that really made a difference for me. And we know that obviously people of color are disproportionately likely to be injured or killed by police officers. Low-income people are disproportionately likely to be injured or killed by police officers. People with mental health challenges, including autism, are disproportionately likely to be injured or killed by police officers. So for those reasons, it was that film was very personal to me, and that was always part of the conversations that we had with audiences about the film. And then the Ritual is an interesting one because it's in a very different genre, obviously, but at its heart, it is still a film about a very vulnerable woman and this group of people who came together to try to help her. It just so happened that group of people was nuns or sisters and priests. They were members of the clergy, but at the same time, they were coming together and putting themselves at great personal risk, at great spiritual risk, and at great physical risk to try to help this woman. So it was personal for me in that sense too, and that's always how I've tried to frame the film, as the story of a group of people who came together and put themselves at great risk to try to help this poor, vulnerable woman.
Wow, that's amazing. So what's one myth about independent filmmaking you'd like to bust for up-and-coming directors?
There's a lot. There's so many misconceptions that I had. I think one of the biggest ones that I think has taken me a long time to really reconcile is, very, very rarely does success happen overnight. It takes a lot of time, and even though it might appear to the general public that success happens overnight for somebody, that like all of a sudden they have one film come out and all of a sudden they're a superstar. That it doesn't, very, very rarely does it happen that way. Most of the time it's incremental. You make one film, and one film, that film allows you to get meetings with people that you couldn't get meetings before. If people will pick up your phone, they'll pick up your phone call a little more often. They'll respond to your emails a little more often. You'll be able to get meetings with some people you couldn't get meetings with before. And then you make your next film, and that window opens up a little wider. But it's an incremental. That's probably the biggest kind of piece of advice or perspective or the myth. A myth that it took me a long time to really, really understand. And sometimes I still have to remind myself of that it is incremental. People's success in this business is incremental. Very rarely, if ever, does it happen overnight.
That's true. So when people finish watching your films, what kind of conversation do you hope they're having afterward?
I think conversations that relate to, whether we or anyone is doing enough to help. There are so many vulnerable communities in America and around the world. It's been such a topic of conversation. Recently, my family is from Mexico. And, the Latino community, the Hispanic community in America is being persecuted in some horrendous ways right now, by political leaders, by people who listen to those political leaders. So and I ask myself those questions. Am I doing enough? Are we, as a public society, doing enough to help vulnerable communities, live their lives with dignity and respect and security? And usually the answer that I come up with myself is no, I'm not doing enough. I try to do as much as I can, especially with my films, the films that I choose to make. That's one of the reasons that I'm attracted to this type of subject matter, is because I want my films to ask those questions.
That's great. So you've already left a mark on socially conscious cinema. What legacy are you hoping to build in the next decade?
I'm hoping to do more of that. I really want to make, I love horror movies. I love action movies. I love thrillers, and all of those movies can absolutely ask really important questions. But I really, I have several films that I really want to make that deal with, real historical events that speak to something about today, whether it's, our treatment of immigrants, or our treatment of people with mental health challenges, our treatment of people with disabilities, our treatment of people of color, or the LGBT community, whatever it might be. I'm really most interested in telling stories that offer a new perspective, or can maybe open an audience member's mind to seeing those communities in a different way that might help them maybe have a little more compassion or empathy for those communities.
Yeah, that's great. So what's next for you, David?
We're not sure yet. My producing partner and I and my company, we've got several irons in the fire right now. We're just kind of waiting to see which one takes flight first. But they're a lot of stories about real historical events that say something about today.
Okay, and that you guys wrote, right? Or
yeah, that we've kind of developed from scratch. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. So what's one piece of advice you give to filmmakers who feel like they don't fit in the industry mold?
I'm definitely one of them. I don't feel like I fit into that industry mold at all. I don't come from, I don't have a family who is involved in show business or politics, or I didn't come from a family of a tremendous amount of means or anything like that. I don't fit a lot of what people think of as the show business mold. And the biggest thing that I've tried to learn is not to write what you think people want you to write. Write what you're passionate about, write what you're fascinated by, write what you're interested in. That's what is, people really didn't start responding to my writing until I started just writing what I was passionate about or what I was fascinated by, rather than thinking, oh, I have to write a thriller because they want a thriller. I have to write an action movie because they want an action movie. I have to write a comedy because they want a comedy.
Yeah. That's great advice, actually. That's great.
Yeah.
How can our audience contact you?
My Instagram is probably the best way. I don't post all the time, but I'm on there at least a couple times a day scrolling. So it's D Midell, just D and then my last name Midell.
Okay, great. So we're nearing the end of the show. That's all, folks. Thank you for watching. Dave Midell, everyone. Thank you, David.
Thank you for having me. It was a great conversation.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.